It's been a long time coming, but I have to admit that I was incredibly curious to drive this car you see next to me. This is the 5th generation Hyundai Santa Fe, and ever since I've seen it for the first time, I thought, wow, Hyundai really outdid themselves. And if you want to see just how far the South Korean company or the South Korean giant has come in the past 25 years, all you have to do is check out the car right next to me. This car could rival premium models in this segment easily in my book. If it wasn't for a couple of things here and there, this could pass as a Range Rover level car any day of the week. And I am that impressed with it. I'm not going to hide the fact that after I spent 3 days with it, I am a big fan of this car. I am human after all. I'm trying to be as objective as possible, but I actually like it a lot. So today we're going to discuss the 5th generation Hyundai Santa Fe. It's not exactly a brand new car. It was unveiled about 2 years ago, but it took me a while to get my hands on one, and it finally happened, so here I am presenting it to you. We're going to talk about the European versions in this video because US versions do get a couple of different options and engine choices, which is a shame. In Europe we are limited to a 1.6 liter engine, but you're gonna see it does its job rather well. I don't think you need a lot more power. So what is a Hyundai Santa Fe? It's a, well, depending on the market, mid-size SUV or a D segment car. To put it better into perspective, it's a rival for models like the Skoda Kodiaq, like the Toyota Highlander in my book, even though that's a bit bigger, the Mazda CX-60, the Nissan X-Trail, and from the European side of things, well, maybe the Tayron, the Volkswagen Tayron. And if you want to include the premium models, the BMW X3, Audi Q5, or the Mercedes-Benz GLC, even though they feel a lot smaller than this one. This one actually falls in between the D and the E segment. So in terms of length, we're talking about 4 meters 83. So it's a bit longer even than the Skoda Kodiaq, which is pretty big for the D segment already. And the wheelbase is 2,870 millimeters. So it grew in that length compared to the previous generation by 5.5 centimeters in total and by 5 centimeters in terms of wheelbase alone. So quite a big increase from one generation to another. And now this car feels like a true big boy. Furthermore, I absolutely love its design. You're going to notice it's rather bulky. It's very upright, both up front and in the back, and it doesn't have a lot of different shapes, but you will find a lot of the letter H on this car in a number of places. It seems like an obsession. So you'll notice that the headlamps have an H as the daytime running lights. You'll notice that the bumper has an elongated H right in it, right? So when you hop inside, you're going to notice a lot more of those H's, and the taillights have the shape of an H as well. But overall, yes, I actually love the way it looks. I know some people have said it resembles the Defender, and I think the greenhouse is to blame for that more than the front end, even though the front end with its rather bulky and squarish shapes does resemble the Defender as well. I think this is more where you will find the Defender shape, right? Now, depending on where you live, you might have a number of different equipment lines available. Over here in Romania, we only have the luxury version and the calligraphy version, which are the most expensive ones, the top level ones, right? Either way, you will get 20-inch wheels on this car, and that's it. There's no 18-inch, no 19-inch, no 21-inch. And I think they could have gone with a bigger wheel, but I think they stuck to 20 inches because they didn't want to ruin the car's suspension, right? The doors open quite wide, so you can have easy access inside. And around the back, I know this has been a controversial issue because a lot of people said that the rear end doesn't really look that good. I don't mind it that much. I do get why people say that. It feels like the rear end is sagging somehow. But from what I could gather from interviews I've seen with the Hyundai designers, they did that because they wanted to offer a really wide opening for the boot. And in order to do that, they had to have very thin exterior walls, and they couldn't fit the dampers for the tailgate in any other fashion, and they had to stick the tail lamps at the bottom of the car, and that gives it like a rounded off shape at the bottom, and it feels like it's sagging somehow. Well, that's the explanation I heard, but I hope the facelift will do something about the rear end, because it truly is a shame. This car is absolutely awesome, as you're about to see. Well, let's talk about the engine choices, shall we? Those will depend on where you live. If we're talking about Europe, there are two configurations available, as far as I know, both using the same 1.6 liter 4-cylinder turbocharged petrol engine. It's a modern SmartStream G generation model with everything you could imagine, both direct and indirect injection, variable distribution, timing chain, a variable geometry turbo, and everything you could possibly want from a modern era engine. Basically, by having two types of injection, this should nullify the problem direct injection engines have, and this one used to have, with carbon buildup on the valves. Now, you will have a choice between a self-charging hybrid and a plug-in hybrid, right? So, if you're going for the self-charging hybrid, for the pure hybrid version, if you will, we're talking about 215 horsepower and 365 Newton meters of torque, coming from the 1.6 liter engine tuned to 160 horsepower and an electric motor good for 68 horsepower. Then if you want to go for the plug-in hybrid version, you're looking at a combination of a 1.6 160 horsepower version with a 98 horsepower electric motor right behind it, and you get a total of 252 horsepower and up to 367 Newton meters of torque. Another big difference is the battery size. If you're talking about the self-charging version, we're talking about a 1.4 kilowatt hour battery, whereas on the plug-in hybrid model, we're talking about a 10 times bigger battery of 13.8 kilowatt hours. And that should give you a range of about 33 miles, says Hyundai. That's unlikely, because the usable capacity of that battery is around 11 kilowatt hours. So yeah, in order to get 50 kilometers of range out of it, you would probably need to have an energy consumption of about 22. That's not exactly doable, because this is actually a quite big car. What I noticed is that the onboard trip computer, or the onboard computer, shows a perpetual 15% state of charge all the time. So the battery indicator in the dashboard doesn't go down to 0%. It always shows that buffer. So don't judge this car by the whole estimated electric range. Both models come with a 6-speed automatic torque converter transmission, and both models come with all-wheel drive. In terms of suspension, you have a McPherson setup up front and a multi-link independent setup in the back, because we're talking about an all-wheel drive system. Let's talk about the interior, and we're gonna start with the boot. As usual, this is a pretty big one. As I explained, the opening is huge, and that's why the car has this shape at the back. You can notice how the sides are rounded to offer more room over here in the back end. Notice just how the dampers are fitted over here on the sides. Now, the floor is flush with the loading lip, so getting stuff in and out won't be an issue. You have 630 liters no matter the configuration. However, on this version, the 5-seat version, you have some extra storage room under the floor over here. You have plenty of anchor points over here, a 12 volt 180 watt socket, and a domestic socket as well over here, which is pretty nice. Yeah, some more space over there, and that's about it. If we had the 7-seat version, I would have to get in the back. I'm so glad we don't. So let's talk about the build quality. We do have a shade, of course. It has become a rather common feature these days. And we have leather over here, textured wood trim over here and brushed aluminum over here, leather over here, and plastic over here, but it's not a bad plastic, right? The button for the seat heating in the back, and two cup holders, and these are the rear seats, right? You can adjust the backrests in 3 different positions, and you can slide the seats forward and backward about 15 centimeters depending on your needs, whether you need more room in the boot for more luggage or you need more room for the front passengers, right? And this is the legroom situation. This driver's seat is not adjusted in my comfortable driving position. It's a bit further back. I'm 6 feet tall, and this is how I fit in the car. Plenty of room. Once again, we have that H leather imprint over here, 2 anchor points, an air vent, and we don't have a climate control panel over here in the back, which is a shame. I would have preferred to have a 3-zone climate control system. This is a storage space over here, quite interesting, and something I haven't seen before, which is this armrest that can also raise like this from the back, so that the rear passengers can access stuff stored in the armrest. So that's pretty cool. We also have USB-C chargers on the back seats over here, so you should be covered in terms of charging your devices. And this is the dashboard of the new Hyundai Santa Fe. And I think that steering wheel reminds me of a car, but I can't really put my finger on it. Could you please tell me what car has a similar steering wheel in the comments? And now let's hop in the front, check out the build quality over there as well. So we're talking about the same materials, right? Leather, wood, leather, brushed aluminum, and everything feels really nice to the touch. The seats are very comfortable. I spent a lot of time in them, and once again you notice that H emblem over here. I spent a lot of time in them, and they are nice. If you go for the calligraphy model, this has a function, it's called the relax function, that actually stretches the seat all the way back, and you can take a nap if you want to, but I don't think that's going to be too useful to too many people, right? This is the ambient light in the car, and you can actually see an H pattern as well if you connect the dots over there. And I think this interior is premium as hell. You have wood trim over here, leather. This is a nice material that resembles Alcantara, but it's not exactly Alcantara. This is aluminum for the Bose sound system. You have 2 screens over here united in one single block. And as far as I know, this is the same exact screen used on BMW models. The curved screen is exactly the same. It's made by LG. So that's a useful tidbit. This is the HVAC panel. I absolutely love the way it looks, and it's really easy to operate, and I find it very, very nice. These are some shortcuts for the multimedia system, auto hold, driving modes, right, EV or HEV mode, and other functions. And you have 2 wireless charging pads over here, which is pretty nice. And that also comes with 2 additional charging ports, USB-C charging ports, which is also pretty good. And we have an additional storage space over here. I already mentioned that. Yeah, pretty good overall, and I absolutely love the interior of this car. I should also point out that you have a digital rear view mirror if you want it. Let's say you have plenty of people in the back, you can't really see through the rear window, you can actually use this. And I love this upholstery over here. I am missing the sunroof though, which is not available on this market. Now, I'm pretty sure a lot of you will be curious about the real life electric range of this car. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to do my usual electric range test with it because I got the car with 39% battery, and I just didn't have the time to recharge it, or I didn't want to spend the money to recharge it, to be honest. I'm not making a lot of money from these videos, so I'm not trying to spend any more. I got the car with 39% battery, and at about 14% the internal combustion engine kicked in. So with about 25% of the battery, I covered about 8 kilometers purely electric. So that should give you a complete range of about 32 kilometers. But then again, out of these 32 kilometers of pure electric range, some 15% of them won't be available because that's the battery's buffer. So subtract 15% and you get the real life range of this car. However, I was quite impressed with the efficiency it has, because around town I had an average fuel consumption with the battery depleted, so in hybrid mode, of 6.7 liters per 100 kilometers covered. Let's round it up to 7 liters. Even then, it's not a bad figure at all for how big this car is, for the engine it has, the power, 252 horsepower. I think that is a really good figure. 7 liters per 100 kilometers covered, that's a 2-liter diesel in most cities. And I had an average speed around town of about 18 kilometers an hour. So yeah, I think you could get even better results in different traffic. But overall, I was quite amazed by how refined this car feels around town. It's very quiet inside. The suspension does its job brilliantly. It soaks up the bumps incredibly graciously. Doesn't send any weird jolts inside the cabin. Doesn't send any weird noises whatsoever. So yeah, I actually like the way the suspension works on this car a lot. And I like the way they created this symphony between the ICE and the electric motor. So most of the time, 99% of the time, in order to save battery, the car will set, in order to save energy, the car will set off in electric mode. It will rely on that 98 horsepower, 304 Newton meters, by the way, has the electric motor, and it will set off electrically. And then the ICE will kick in at some point. It will depend on a number of factors. It's not based on a fixed speed, as many people seem to think. It's just based on how hard you press on the gas pedal, how fast you're going, how much power the car needs, whether you're on an incline, and so on, right? But what I like is the fact that even when that 1.6 liter engine kicks in, you don't really feel it. You hear it if you're paying very close attention, but it's very smooth. The transition from electricity to petrol is very smooth overall. So yeah, that's something I really like about this car. How smooth everything goes. And a lot of the time you will notice that the ICE will be shut off. So the process goes like this. If your battery is completely depleted, right? If you're going in hybrid mode, you set off electrically, the ICE kicks in at some point, and then it turns back off, and the car runs using the electric motor alone, right? Depending on its power needs. On deceleration, the ICE will be turned off. And if you watch the rev counter using this camera, you will notice, even as I'm driving this car, just how often the ICE just completely turns off. The ICE can work as a generator, it can work as a power supply, it can work together with the electric motor. It has a number of roles it can do, right? So I noticed that a lot of the times, even though the ICE is turned on, it will only do so in order to recharge the battery. So you'll see it being stuck at 1200 RPM or 1400 RPM while you accelerate, right? And how does that work? Well, the ICE is turned on. It works as a generator to replenish the battery, and at the same time the electric motor powers you and moves you forward while also accelerating. So there's a menage of things every single part of this drivetrain does. You don't have to worry about it. The car's onboard systems will do their own thing, and they will decide which power source will be more efficient for such a situation, and so on and so forth, right? I also like the way the car behaves when you're running with the ICE on, because the 6-speed torque converter is very smooth as well. You barely notice the gear shifts, and everything feels very refined. Around town, you will very, very seldom notice the ICE while driving. So that's a pretty good thing in my book. So overall, very refined around town, very efficient, and very quiet. So the final test, we are on the highway right now, and I don't really know just how much noise my microphone captures, but the atmosphere inside this car is very, very quiet. I used my decibel meter to check out just how noisy it is, and the average return by my app was 77 decibels. That is pretty good at 130 kilometers an hour, especially compared to a bunch of modern day BMWs, because I tested the 7 Series, the current 7 Series, I tested the current M5, they both tapped out at 78, so noisier than this car, which I have to say again, performed impressively in terms of ride refinement and sound insulation. The only noises you hear inside the cabin come from the side mirrors, which are pretty big, so you would expect them to be a bit louder, but they're not that noisy. Overall, let's do an 80 to 130 kilometer an hour sprint to see just how the car behaves. 80, let's go. And we are a bit uphill. 100, 110, 120, 130. So you won't be struggling for power on the highway. You have enough resources to keep up with the traffic. The car always has a buffer of energy inside that battery. It has an algorithm that makes sure it is replenished after every hard acceleration, if you will. Right now I have the instrument cluster set to power source, and it shows me that the car is actually recharging the battery after that hard acceleration. You would have to keep going uphill, pedal to the metal for a long time to completely deplete the battery buffer, okay? So don't worry about that, the car will take care of the buffer. So what's the fuel consumption at 130 kilometers an hour? I average 8.7 liters per 100 kilometers covered, which might be interpreted as much by people driving, I don't know, 2-liter diesels. But overall, considering the power and the performance of this car and its size, of course, can't forget about the size, I think it's a pretty good result overall. And if I had this car, I would have no issues whatsoever in going outside the city a couple of times a month with it, you know, without worrying about anything in that regard. What you just heard was the highway driving assistant. This car has it. It's basically a system that can change lanes for you, but I find utterly useless, because in order for it to work, you have to keep your hands on the steering wheel, right? So you have to make sure there is no cars coming from the left or the right. You have to activate your turn signal, and then as the car changes lanes, right? As the car changes lanes, you have to keep your hands on the steering wheel, otherwise the whole maneuver is cancelled. So how hard is it to do this with your hands? Like seriously, you don't really need that system. I appreciate it's there, but I don't find it useful at all. So you cannot opt out of it, but I definitely wouldn't buy it if it was an optional feature. So overall, a very refined car on the highway with plenty of power. I've seen some videos saying that the internal combustion engine sounds a bit strung out whenever you are at higher speeds. I barely notice it, to be honest. It's very quiet under there. You only hear it when you press really hard on the gas pedal, if you push it really hard. But otherwise, you barely hear it, you barely notice it. And I think this is a very good package overall. So let's pull over and try to come up with some conclusions. Now, I know a lot of you haven't been watching me for a long time, even though this channel is pretty old. It has been around for 11 years. But I've been saying some things quite repetitively in these past 11 years. One of them is the fact that the Hyundai Kia group has one of the best price to performance to quality ratios out there. And that same goes for this car. If this car didn't have the Hyundai badge on it, and it had a 3-liter straight 6 under the hood, it would have given the Defender a huge run for its money. I think the 1.6 liter is the only drawback of this car, along with maybe a different design for the rear end, but that's subjective. Otherwise, I absolutely loved it. And if we're talking prices, we're talking about roughly 53,000 euros for the luxury hybrid version, and about 57,000 euros for the plug-in hybrid version. If you want to go for the calligraphy version, 1,800 euros extra, right? So at 54,000 euros, I think this is a bargain in today's space. That's as long as you can actually kind of ignore the fact that this is a Hyundai. I know for a Hyundai, this seems like a lot of money, but if you look at the car objectively, it's not. And I think this is a bargain. But I want to know what you guys think about this car. Would you be willing to go to look past the brand and see this car as it is? And if you think so, would you buy it? This has been my review of the Hyundai Santa Fe, and until next time, don't forget to feed your passions. Ciao.